What's up, everybody, and welcome to a very special, brief video here on the Slam Sessions. Unfortunately, the wrestling world was rocked last night when we found out that Jon Huber, known to wrestling fans as Brodie Lee, and Luke Harper, passed away from what's being referred to as his by his wife as a non-COVID related lung issue. Um, so I'm normally not the kind of guy that does, a video directly after something like this, but this one hits a little differently. For a couple of reasons. There's those guys that you see, and you're blessed to see at the infancy of their career, and then you get to watch them evolve from the young indie wrestler that they started out as to the major, you know, impact player that they would become. And for me, Brodie Lee was one of those guys. The first ever independent wrestling show I ever attended, and I mean like not like local indie, I mean like full-fledged indie wrestling show. Um, was a Dragon Gate USA show, um, and that was I can't remember the year, but featured on that show was a guy by the name of Brodie Lee. And during that night, I turned to my friend Andre and I said, "Man, this guy is good. Like he's really good. Like he's better than you know I've heard about because I've heard of Brodie Lee before, but like for a guy that size, it was incredible to see the things that he did that night. Um, Also featured on that show were two young guys named Pac and John Moxley, and those were the guys that stood out to my friends and I. And I remember a couple of months later, the lot of them, the three of them, were basically, you know, being rumored to being signed by WWE and eventually would be signed. Um, that night made me a full-fledged Brodie Lee fan, and I realized from that day on that I was going to support him in everything that he did in WWE and beyond. Um, I never imagined that at this point I'd have to make a video about this because there was a part of me that was always gonna make a video specifically dedicated to Brodie Lee just because of how much of an immense fan I was of his. Um, when he debuted in WWE for as a member of the Wyatt family, I immediately I think the whole wrestling world took notice of not just how talented Brodie and Bray and Rowan and eventually Braun were, but it put a big highlight on how amazing of an athlete a guy like Brodie Lee or at that point Luke Harper was. And I was blessed to see the Wyatt family versus the Shield live um, in New York, and it was just one of the most incredible matches. The match stole the show. There was no doubt about it. Seeing Seth Rollins jump from the stands onto the Wyatts, it was an incredible moment. Um, I was blessed enough to see Luke Harper wrestle live a few times, but I was so excited a few years ago when I went to WrestleMania Access to see Luke Harper have his return singles match against the man who's now known as T-Bar, but Dominik Dijakovic. He hyped it a lot on social media, He called it one of the most important matches of his life. And I went with my friend Tommy, and I told him, when we had gotten into the stands that time, that night, I said, I don't want to go anywhere until I see Luke Harper's match. And he was kind enough to indulge me, and we sat there and we watched everything that went on, and then that match came out on, and I did the best I could to cheer as loud as I possibly could for him. There was a little kid in front of us that started a "Let's go Harper, let's go" chant, and he kept trying to get it to go through, and then finally the whole crowd kind of joined in, and we all supported Luke Harper throughout that entire match, in which he did a Michinoku driver from the apron to the floor on a near 300-pound Dijakovic. The whole match was absolutely incredible. It was hard hitting. It's everything you wanted to see in a match between two guys of that size, plus more. And I was blown away to the point where I did something that I had never done before, and I haven't done since. I slid into the DMs of a professional wrestler, and I thanked Luke Harper for making my night, because that match did. I met Diamond Dallas Page and EC3 that night. I got to call the end of a wrestling match with one of my best friends on commentary. But the one thing I take away from that night more than anything else was that match. He didn't have to say anything. He didn't have to, acknowledge the fact that I even messaged him or whatever. But he said thank you. And that's the class act that he was. He took the time out to say thank you to a random fan who just hit him up on Twitter about his match. And, over the past couple of days, it feels like a couple of days because of how hard I think it's hit everybody. But over the past couple of hours, we've seen just an immense amount of messages from people who worked with Brodie. And not an ill word was said about him. He's one of those incredible people that, everybody mentioned his wrestling skill, which was he was one of the most talented wrestlers out there, but they mentioned his wrestling skill second to the fact of how good of a father and a husband he was, and a friend. And to me, the measure of a man is what is said about him by his peers, and Brodie Lee's peers all could do nothing else but speak insanely highly of him. So, seeing his career evolution, seeing the way that, WWE kind of put him on the sidelines for a little while, and then seeing him make the jump to AEW, I was very excited to see what was next in the career of who would now be referred back to as Brodie Lee. And I watched that match with Cody, and I thought it was one of the best dog collar matches I'd ever seen. And it's a weird thing to know that I got to see his last singles match in WWE live, because that's his last singles match, was at Worlds Colliding against Dijakovic. And to see the dog collar match on AEW TV against Cody, I would have never thought that would have been his last match ever. But what a way to go out, right? That match was, a masterclass. It was unbelievable. So, at the end of the day, the world lost an amazing husband, father, and friend. And right under that, the wrestling world lost an amazing, immensely talented professional wrestler. Not just in the ring, but on the mic, and obviously to everyone backstage. So from the Slam Sessions, we'd like to offer our condolences to the family and friends of Brodie Lee. Brodie, you made my night more than once as a wrestling fan. I can't do anything else but thank you for that. Rest in peace, Brodie Lee. You'll be missed.